Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are going to take a look at another figure that I just got in the mail, and it is another Toyway Walking with Dinosaurs figure. My collection of these Toyway figures has been building very slowly, but quite nicely, as I now have, I think, 5 of the figures altogether from this toy line. There are quite a few more yet to obtain, and I think the rest of them honestly are ones that I really would love to have, but unfortunately the other ones are a little pricier and I haven't been able to obtain them quite yet, but as time goes on I've been getting some pretty good deals on them as they pop up. This Torosaurus was one of the ones that I probably wanted the least because I feel like it's one of the ugliest figures in the line. But I did still want it because I do want to try to complete the line at some point, even though as far as getting ones like the Liaplorodon, it's probably going to be impossible without spending a fortune. I am still super psyched to have this here to add to my collection, and honestly, just like what happens most often with these figures, once I actually get it in person, I think it is much nicer than I ever considered it to be when I actually have it in hand, and that follows through with this Torosaurus. So let's go ahead and get a closer look at it right now. So looking up here at the head sculpt, you can see some really nice detailing for the most part, as far as like skin texture and everything. It does look really quite nice, and the actual paint application is really nicely done as well. I love that there's some really nice darker tones of color that run through certain areas, and then lighter tones, and then a little bit darker. So the coloration and the actual paint application is really nicely done, very realistically done. This one, and unlike a lot of the other ones that I've obtained, has quite a bit of damage to it as far as the paintwork goes, especially up here on the horns. You can see quite a bit of paint damage, but regardless, I'm still happy to have it, and the actual body looks pretty good for the most part. There's some paint chips here and there, but the head itself does have some significant paint damage to it. I would consider touching it up, but honestly, I don't really like to mess with them because I could end up making it look a little worse, honestly, but that's just my opinion on my painting skill. I don't know if I want to try to mess with it. I may just keep it the way it is, but the actual detailing again of the head looks really nice. You've got a really nicely sculpted nostril, beautifully sculpted beak there on the front of the snout, and you can see some nice detailing. It's been dry brushed over with a blackish coloration to bring that detail of the beak out quite nicely. You can also see some pink inside the mouth there, which is fairly realistic looking, I'd assume. And then you can also see some really nice browns there at the tip of the beak, which looks really good. Now, as far as this figure goes, the only area that I really don't like is the eye area. I think the eye area specifically is quite ugly, and although it looks pretty close to what you do see on the Torosaurus in the film, I still think the entire area in general just doesn't look very good, and I really don't like the eye socket they've sculpted out here. It looks really ugly, and also the white coloration around it I think is a little bit of an eyesore. That being said, once we move past the eye area and the awkward, almost looks like an alien for some reason, I don't know why, but once we move past that area, we move up into the frill, you can see that the detailing actually looks really good up in the frill, and Toyway continues to impress me with the overall detailing that they cram into their figures. Again, for their time, they are very highly detailed, and the actual paintwork up here looks really good as well. You can see quite a bit of different tones of color, even some black areas that kind of run up the inside of the frill there, and then you've got this really cool spotting, which is something you also see, I do believe, in the film, with that little yellow spot surrounded by the black, and the sculpt work is really quite nicely done over there. Beautiful browns as we run up the length of the frill right there. Moving back into the neck, you start to see some really nice scaling picking up, and they've given it kind of like a dry brushing with, I guess, some black it looks like, or maybe a very dark gray in certain areas, which helps to bring that detail out quite nicely. And they've also given the dinosaur quite a bit of spotting here and there, which almost reminds me of Chronicle Collectibles, as they love to give their dinosaur figures chickenpox all the time. But you can kind of see that here, although it looks much better on this than you see on a Chronicle Collectibles piece. If you look at the back of the frill is also quite nicely detailed, but there's just not an insane amount of detailing back there. It's not as nice as you see in the front, but it's still pretty nice. The detailing of the neck continues as we move back into the shoulder area. We have the shoulder blade protruding from the skin a little bit there, but it's not extremely noticeable. We come down here to the underside of the throat. You can see some nice detailing, as well as the actual throat itself being elaborated quite nicely. The detailing there is also not quite as nice as some of the other models, but it's still decent enough. You've got a lot of movement kind of being shown here in this area with lots of skin bunching up and stuff going on. As you move back here into the leg, you can see the detailing of the leg looks pretty nice. Nothing over the top, but again, nice color tones, really beautiful difference in color. You've got like light grays and darker grays and everything throughout. The foot sculpt looks really cool. The nails specifically, I think, are painted with a light gray. It's really hard to tell, but actually back here, if we look here, yeah, you can see they're painted with a light gray. So they do have some paint there to them. You've got the elbow sculpted out up there. Nice creasing in the joint of the elbow as well. Coming down here toward the ankle also. Looking up here at the body, you've got lots of skin wrinkling going on, beautiful detailing in that general vicinity. Even though the dinosaur is in a total neutral position, you can still kind of see like the skin moving within the animal, which looks really cool. You almost can see the rib cage there as I turn it, but it's not super visible. Nice detailing though as we run back along the spinal column. You can see that really nice scaling, especially up here in the hip region of the dinosaur. That scaling looks fantastic. Very large animal type scaling. Moving down into the thigh continues to look quite nice. The muscle definition isn't all that noticeable, but it is there. We've got the kneecap sculpted out right there in the front of the animal. Moving down into the legs, the leg sculpt looks decent. Nice foot sculpt here in the back, nothing over the top, but it looks pretty good. Again, for their time, these were made a long time ago. They're still really impressive. Again, nice skin wrinkling and skin folding going on right there. Lots of movement really shown right in that vicinity, right here as the thigh connects to the tail. And then we run out the length of the nice short Torosaurus tail, and that also looks quite nicely sculpted, quite nicely done. The detailing on the underside, though, I will say, definitely is a bit muted in comparison to what I'm kind of used to with these figures. There's just not really that much skin texture or anything going on the underside. If we look at the opposing side, of course, it's going to look pretty much just like what we saw on the other side due to the fact that it is in a 100% neutral position, as all of these figures are. So you don't really see any difference going on as far as the sculpt work on this side that we didn't see on the opposing side, but that just means that it looks really good on both sides. Nice detailing all over the figure, and again, the paintwork looks really good, very natural looking. Nice striping as we run down the back with a beautiful airbrushing of a blackish coloration, and then you've got lots of many different color variations throughout as far as lighter and darker grays and even blacks creeping through in certain spots, and then that spotting going on. So I think the paintwork is really beautifully done on the figure. Very nice, very lifelike. It's just that the detailing itself is a little muted in certain areas, and then we have that very, very awkward looking eye area on this Torosaurus, but other than that, I still think it's a pretty darn nice figure. As far as the size goes, if we go probably, we'll go from the snout, but the horns look like they might be a little bit longer. But from the snout to the tail, you're looking at about 8 1/4 inches or 21 centimeters. If we actually go from the horns, yes, now you can see it's about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. And for a height to the top of the frill, it's a little bit under 4.5 inches or around 11.5 centimeters, somewhere in that range. For a size comparison, there's Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line. And you can see next to this Torosaurus that they are all clearly not to scale as far as this figure goes, but that does show you at the same time that this Torosaurus has some pretty decent size. I would put it at probably a little bit larger than a medium. It's kind of like in between medium heading toward large, but it's not quite there yet, but very, very close. Regardless, you can see that it does have some pretty nice size, as all of the Walking with Dinosaurs figures did for their time, aside from like maybe a couple. There were a few smaller ones, but for the most part, they were all around the same size range, so you can definitely tell that it does sport some pretty darn nice size to it. So this Toyway Walking with Dinosaurs Torosaurus is pretty nice, but it's not as nice as the others. This is the first time that I've received one of these figures that I would say I'm not head over heels in love with it, but I kind of came into purchasing it with that assumption because I did not expect it to be that great. I've kind of been eyeing it up for a few years now, ever since I learned of the Walking with Dinosaurs figures, and kind of knew that I would at some point want to buy it just because I want to try to complete the collection eventually, although I really don't think that'll ever happen because some of them are just too pricey. But I was kind of dreading the day that I would pick it up because of the awkward, ugly look on its face, but now that I have actually picked it up, I am pretty darn happy with it. I definitely think it looks nicer than I expected it to look, but it doesn't look as nice as the others did that I do already have, like the Polacanthus, Ankylosaurus, Utahraptor, and Allosaurus. I feel like all of those 4 figures were much nicer than this one, but at the same time, this one definitely still is similar to those and still belongs with them. It's just probably the weakest out of the group. But the detailing on the figure is still quite nice for the most part. The only areas that I really think aren't really that highly detailed would be the underside, because the underside is really muted for the most part as far as skin texture goes, and the back of the frill is okay. It has some nice detail, but not as much as you see elsewhere on the body, so that area as well could have been probably sculpted out a little nicer, but it's nothing really to complain about, honestly. It's not that bad, and I feel like the skin texture all over the animal, like the big large scaling as we run back into the hip region and the shoulder region, looks really good. The paint application as well is fairly natural looking for a ceratopsian as far as what they chose for the series. I think the only area that doesn't look that great would be the spikes on the head of the Torosaurus, and that's just because there's not really any tones of color to the horns, but they look as good as I think they need to. They're just not that great. They're kind of like too bright, I think. I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but I'm just not a huge fan of the color of the horns. But I think it actually plays off pretty well in contrast to the rest of the coloration of the body. So it's sort of like a 50-50 where I don't really like the color of them that much, and I feel like maybe if they would have added some colored tones to them, like maybe started to weather them up a little bit, they could have looked decent and made them not so bright, but at the same time they play off of the body really well, so I sort of like them. It's sort of confusing. But regardless, I still think that overall the figure is definitely a nice looking figure, just the weakest one that I've purchased so far. But if you would like to pick one up, they do show up occasionally on eBay. They are long discontinued, so they can be pricey, can be harder to find, but I will do my best to try to find a link to include in the description for you to pick one up if you would like, and if not, then make sure you find this one way or another if you do want to buy it. Keep scouring eBay, again, as it should show up again very soon. It usually does. And also make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.